I did not follow my wife because I thought I was the kind of man who followed his wife. I followed her because the coffee in my truck had gone cold, because she had told me she would be at school grading winter recital papers, and because the elementary school parking lot had been empty except for a plow truck and a row of frozen bicycles chained to the fence. 20 minutes later, I was parked under a dying street lamp outside a cedar cabin at the edge of Lake Willoughby, watching Nora stand on the porch with a man I had never seen before. He was older, silver hair, one shoulder lower than the other. He wore a flannel shirt under a coat that looked too thin for Vermont in February. Nora stepped toward him, and he folded her into his arms. I remember the windshield fogging around the edges. I remember the radio whispering some old weather report I was not listening to. I remember my right hand still resting on the key, like some part of me knew I should turn around before I saw something I could not unsee. But I stayed. The porch light flickered above them, and for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I looked at my wife and felt like I was watching a stranger keep warm in someone else's life. My name is Caleb Mercer. I was 41 that winter, and I fixed clocks for a living, not watches. Not the little battery kind people buy at the drugstore and throw away when they stop ticking. I mean grandfather clocks, mantle clocks, carriage clocks, old wall regulators with brass pendulums, and faces yellowed by the hands of people who had been dead longer than I had been alive. My shop sat on Main Street in a small town in northern Vermont, squeezed between a bakery that opened at 5 every morning and a bookstore that never seemed to make money, but somehow never closed. The sign above my door said Mercer Clock Repair in black paint my wife had touched up every spring. Inside, the air smelled like oil, dust, walnut cases, and patience. I liked clocks because they told you when something was wrong. A gear slipped. A spring lost tension. A pendulum went out of beat. You listened long enough, and the problem revealed itself. There was comfort in that. Machines had reasons. They did not go quiet because they were angry. They did not disappear for 3 days and come back smelling like rain, asking why you had that look on your face. People were harder. Nora and I had been married 11 years. She was 38, a music teacher at the elementary school. With dark hair she pinned up with pencils, and a singing voice she only used around children and when she thought I was asleep. We had no kids of our own. That was a subject we had circled for years until one day we stopped circling it and simply lived inside the answer. Our house was small, white, and stubborn, with a back porch facing the lake and a piano in the living room that had belonged to Nora's grandmother. On Sundays, she made mint tea, put old records on the turntable, and walked barefoot over the rugs no matter how cold the floor was. She left notes on the refrigerator in blue marker. Don't forget milk. Your lunch is in the left container. The moon looked huge last night and you missed it. I kept every note longer than I needed to. People always assumed I was the quiet one and Nora was the soft one. They were half right. I was quiet. Nora was soft in the way cedar is soft compared to steel. Warm, yes, but not weak. She could hold a classroom of second graders through a snowstorm power outage with nothing but a hand drum and a song about frogs. She could tell when someone had lied to her before they finished the sentence. She hated cruelty, bad coffee, and people who said, forgive and forget like memory was a coat you could hang by the door. She knew almost everything about me. Almost. The part she did not know, not fully, had a name. Arthur Mercer. My father had been a carpenter. A good one, if you judged a man by what he could do with wood and not by what he did with people. He built cabinets that closed so smoothly they seemed to sigh. He carved stair rails by hand. He could look at a warped board and know whether it could be saved. But he was the kind of man who vanished while standing in the room. When I was a boy, he would leave after arguments with my mother. Not storm out, not slam doors. Just pick up his keys and disappear for a night. Then 2, then 5. He always came back with sawdust in his hair and silence in his mouth. My mother would make dinner like she had not spent the week, pretending not to listen for his truck. After she died, when I was 26, he stood beside her grave with his hands in his coat pockets and said, "She was a good woman, that was all." I waited for something else. I waited for regret, for apology, for the kind of sentence that might explain why my mother had spent half her marriage looking out windows. Nothing came. 3 weeks later, when he called and acted like we might talk about fixing the porch steps at my house, I told him not to call again unless he had something true to say. He never called again. Nora knew the outline. She knew I did not speak to him. She knew I did not want his name in our house. The first year we were married, she once asked gently if I thought I might ever want to hear his side. I had been fixing the latch on our back door. I remember the screwdriver in my hand. "No," I said. She waited. I added, "Some doors stay closed because they're holding the wall up." She never asked again. That was one of the things I loved about her. She respected the locked rooms in me, or I thought she did. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday in January. Nora came home late with snow in her hair and an apology already forming before she got her boots off. Sorry, she said. Mrs. Hammond needed help sorting the winter recital folders. Mrs. Hammond was the principal. Organized to the point of intimidation. The woman labeled her label maker. But teachers stayed late. Schools ran on unpaid hours and microwaved soup. I kissed Nora's forehead, took her coat, and did not think much of it. Then it happened Thursday. Then the next Tuesday. By the fourth late night, I had learned the rhythm of the lie before she spoke it. She would pause at the door, shake out her scarf, look at the floor for half a second, then smile at me too carefully. Long day, she would say. A long day is not a lie by itself. Marriage is full of short answers that stand in for long feelings. But one afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Hammond at Franklin's Market. She was buying grapefruit, of all things, in the middle of a snowstorm. I asked casually how recital preparation was going. She blinked. Recital? The winter program, I said. Nora's been staying late. Mrs. Hammond shifted the grapefruit from one hand to the other. Oh, she said. We actually canceled that this year. Flu season hit too many classes. Nora didn't mention. I could feel the cold from the freezer aisle against my back. No, I said. She probably did. I forget things. Mrs. Hammond smiled politely and moved toward the checkout. I stood there holding a bag of apples, watching one roll out through a hole in the plastic and bump softly against my boot. That night, Nora put her phone face down on the kitchen table. It was such a small thing. Ridiculous, really. People put phones face down all the time. Except Nora didn't. She used hers mostly for school emails, pictures of music worksheets, and sending me photos of dogs she saw around town. She had always left it wherever. Screen up, battery low, trust lying around like loose change. Now it lay black against the wood. While she showered, it buzzed. I did not touch it. I want that to be clear. I did not pick it up. I did not unlock it. I did not become the man I had promised myself I would never become. But the screen lit up. A number with no name. One message. He doesn't know, does he? I stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in my hand until the screen went dark again. When Nora came back, her hair wet, one of my old sweatshirts hanging off her shoulder, she smiled and asked if there was any tea left. I said yes. My voice sounded normal. That scared me more than anything. After that, the small things got louder. Nora started taking cash from the envelope we kept in the junk drawer. Not a lot. 20 here. 40 there. Enough that I would notice because I noticed numbers. We were not wealthy, but we were careful. We had a system. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, savings, emergency fund, and an old coffee tin because Nora said every house needed one thing the banks did not know about. When I asked if she needed money for school supplies, she said, something like that. Something like that is where trust goes to stand in the rain. One evening, I went downstairs to move laundry and found a man's handkerchief in the wash. White cotton, worn thin, with the initials AM stitched in one corner. It was not mine. I used shop rags and my sleeve, like a heathen, according to Nora. I held the handkerchief under the bare basement bulb while the washer clicked behind me. It smelled faintly of pine soap and something medicinal. A few days later, I saw a pharmacy receipt tucked in Nora's wallet when she asked me to grab her library card from it. The pharmacy was in a town 20 miles north. The items were not listed clearly, just codes and amounts, but one line was circled in blue pen. When I came back from the hallway, she took the wallet too quickly. You okay? I asked. Yeah, she said. I waited. She added, just tired. At night, she started taking calls on the porch. In February. In Vermont. She would wrap herself in her green coat, step outside, and speak so quietly the house seemed to lean toward her, trying to listen. I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold between my hands, staring at the door. Once when she came back in, cheeks red from the cold, I asked, Is everything all right? She took off her gloves finger by finger. It's nothing you need to carry, she said. I think she meant it kindly. That was the problem. It sounded like love, but it landed like a wall. I can carry things, I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and something passed across her face that I did not understand. Fear maybe, pity, exhaustion. I know, she said. That's what worries me. I went to bed angry and ashamed of being angry. Nora was not careless with people. She did not play games. She did not flirt with men at parties or collect attention like spare change. If she was hiding something, there had to be a reason. But the mind is not a courtroom. It does not wait for evidence when it already has an old wound ready to testify. My father had hidden behind silence. My mother had spent years saying, he's just tired, until tired became the third person in their marriage. I had promised myself I would never live in a house where someone disappeared one room at a time, and yet there I was, listening to my wife whisper on the porch. I began to watch, not the way people watch in movies. I did not follow her every move. I did not check her mileage or read her emails or put some app on her phone. There was still a line inside me I would not cross, even in pain, but I noticed. Tuesday late, Thursday late, Cash missing after school board meetings, calls after dinner, her piano practice stopping whenever I walked in, the way she flinched once when I said, "You've been somewhere else lately." I closed the clock shop early one Thursday. I told myself I was tired. That was a lie, and I knew it as I turned the sign in the door. The bell gave its small, accusing ring. Outside, the snow along Main Street had gone gray from tires and salt. I sat in my truck across from the school until the last parents picked up their children and the janitor came out to shovel the entrance. Nora's car was not there. I should have gone home. Instead, I drove north. I saw her Subaru near the bridge, 2 cars ahead, the left brake light dimmer than the right. I kept my distance like distance made the act cleaner. My hands were tight on the wheel. Every mile I hated myself a little more. She turned off the main road toward the old Methodist church that the town had turned into a community center after the congregation merged with one in Newport. I had repaired the clock in its steeple years before. It no longer rang, but it still kept time. Nora parked near the back entrance. She got out carrying a brown paper bag. Not groceries. Too small. She knocked twice, then opened the door like someone was waiting. A few moments later, a man stepped into the light spilling from the hallway. Silver hair. Thin coat. Same cis-lowered shoulder I would later see at the cabin. He took the bag from her with both hands. Nora said something. He bowed his head, not like a lover, maybe, but like a man receiving more than food. From where I sat, I could make it mean whatever hurt most. I drove home before she came out. That night, she found me in the living room, pretending to read a book I had not turned a page of in 20 minutes. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm always quiet, not like this." I closed the book. She stood beside the piano, one hand resting on the lid. The lamp behind her made her look tired in a way I had not let myself notice. There were shadows under her eyes. Her hair had started coming loose from its knot. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked. The question hung there. She looked toward the kitchen, then back at me. "Yes," she said softly. My heart hit once, hard. Then she swallowed and said, "But I can't yet." I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the alternative was making a sound I could not take back. "That's convenient, Caleb." "No, it's fine." Her face changed at that word. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Say fine when you're bleeding behind your teeth." I stood up. "You don't get to tell me how to react to a secret you won't explain." She looked like I had slapped her, though I had not raised my voice. "I know," she said. "That should have softened me." It didn't. 2 days later, I found the key. It was in the inside pocket of her winter coat. I was not searching for it. The coat had fallen off the hook by the door, and when I picked it up, something knocked against the floorboard with a dull old sound. A brass key, heavy, tarnished. The kind that belonged to older locks and stubborn doors. A folded piece of paper came with it. An address written in Nora's hand. Millstone Road. Everyone in town knew Millstone Road. It curled along the northern edge of the lake, past summer rentals and empty cabins that belonged to people from Boston who wanted to own silence but not live with it. The address meant nothing to me at first. Then it meant everything I feared. That afternoon, I came home early and heard Nora in the music room. The door was not closed all the way. "I can't tell him yet," she said. A pause. "He'll hate me if he knows." I stepped back before I heard more. There are moments when a person chooses ignorance not because he wants peace, but because one more sentence will make him do something unforgivable. At dinner, she made soup. Tomato because it was the only thing we had that did not require thought. We sat across from each other while steam rose between us like a weather system. "I need to go out for a little while," she said. I put my spoon down. "Where?" Her eyes lifted slowly. "Caleb." "Where, Nora?" She folded her napkin, unfolded it, folded it again. "Please trust me." There it was. The sentence people use when they are asking for the benefits of honesty without paying its cost. I looked at the woman I loved. The woman who had held my hand through my mother's birthday every year because grief kept its own calendar. The woman who knew I hated being left outside closed doors. And I felt something inside me go very still. I waited until she left. Then I followed her to the cabin. I watched the man open the door. I watched her step into his arms. I drove home with the heater blasting and my hands cold anyway. When Nora came in an hour later, I was standing in the kitchen with the brass key on the table. She stopped so suddenly the door remained open behind her. Snow blew in across the mat. "Close the door," I said. She did. Her eyes went to the key. "Caleb, who is he?" The question came out flat. I had imagined yelling. I had imagined breaking something. Instead, my voice sounded like a clock that had wound down. Nora did not answer. That silence was a match dropped into dry grass. I placed both hands on the back of a chair because I did not trust them loose. I saw you. Her face lost color. At the cabin, I said. Before that, at the community center. The calls, the cash, the pharmacy, the key. She pulled out the chair but did not sit. It's not what you think. I closed my eyes. Do you know how insulting that sentence is? I know how it sounds. No, I don't think you do. I opened my eyes. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you want me to ignore every real thing I've seen and wait quietly until you decide I deserve the truth. Tears filled her eyes, but she held herself still. I was trying to protect you. From what? Being married to someone who tells me the truth? Her mouth trembled. The wall clock in the kitchen ticked too loudly. I had repaired it myself the first year we bought the house. Now every second felt like a small hammer. Is it him? I asked. Are you protecting him? She flinched. That flinch told me the wrong story. I stepped back like I needed distance from the answer. My God, no, she said quickly. No, Caleb, listen to me. I have been listening, to footsteps, to half sentences. To you whispering in the cold because whatever you're saying can't happen near me. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I made a mistake. That sentence dropped between us, heavy and open-ended. My stomach turned. What kind of mistake? Not that, she said. Not what you're thinking. You don't know what I'm thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking because you're looking at me like I've already left. That broke something in her voice. For the first time, I saw past my own fear and noticed hers. Not the fear of being caught. Something worse, the fear of hurting someone by telling the truth. She moved toward the hallway, then stopped. I can show you, she said. I stared at her. No more pieces, she whispered. No more asking you to trust a locked door. Get your coat. I should have refused. Pride wanted me to. Pain wanted me to stay in the kitchen with the key and make her explain herself under the fluorescent light. But underneath all of it, there was still the old reflex of marriage. When Nora said, come, some part of me still believed there might be a reason. We drove in separate cars. I do not know why. Maybe because sitting beside her would have been too intimate. Maybe because we both needed somewhere to put our hands. The cabin on Millstone Road looked smaller when I was not hiding under a street lamp. The porch sagged on one side. Snow had piled along the step. The lake behind it was a sheet of black glass under the moon. Nora waited until I got out, then walked to the door. She knocked once. The man opened it. Up close, he seemed older than he had from the truck. His cheeks had hollowed. His hair, once probably dark, had gone fully white. His right hand curled slightly inward. His eyes moved from Nora to me, and the room dropped out from under my life. I knew those eyes, not because I had seen them recently, because I had seen them in a mirror every morning for 41 years. Caleb, my father said. I did not move. Arthur Mercer stood in the doorway of a cabin at the edge of a frozen lake, wearing a flannel shirt with one sleeve rolled unevenly, holding himself like a man expecting a blow he knew he had earned. For a moment, I was not 41. I was 14, sitting on the stairs at midnight, listening for his truck. I was 26 at my mother's grave, waiting for him to say something human. I was every age I had ever been when his silence taught me to stop asking. I looked at Nora. She was crying silently. No, I said. It was the only word I had. Arthur stepped back. I'll go, he said. That made me laugh, once, sharp and ugly. Of course you will. He closed his eyes. Nora touched my sleeve. I pulled away. Don't, I said. She nodded and let her hand fall. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust, wood smoke, and pine oil. A lamp glowed on a table beside a stack of prescription bottles. There was a cot against one wall, a kettle on a hot plate, and cardboard boxes everywhere. Not romantic. Not secret in the way I had feared. Secret in a way that made my anger lose its shape and become something heavier. Arthur sat slowly in a wooden chair. His hands shook when he reached for a mug. Nora spoke first because neither of us seemed capable. He came back in November, she said. I didn't know. Not at first. I saw him at the community center. He was trying to fill out housing assistance paperwork and couldn't hold the pen steady. Arthur stared at the floor. He didn't tell me who he was until I saw his last name. I looked at her. You knew and didn't tell me. Yes, the simplicity of it hurt. Why? Nora inhaled carefully. Because 3 years ago, when I asked if you ever wanted to talk about him, you said some doors stay closed because they hold the wall up. I remember what I said. I believed you, she said. But then he was here. He was sick and alone, and he had nowhere stable to go. I told myself I was just helping with paperwork, then groceries, then medication, then this place. This place, Arthur lifted his head. It was my workshop, he said. His voice had aged into gravel. I looked around again. The boxes, the covered workbench in the corner, the old clamps hanging on a pegboard, a hand plane on a shelf. The past had been sitting here under dust while I made a life pretending it had burned down. Nora walked to one of the boxes and rested her hand on the lid. He kept things, she said. Your mother's things. Yours. He wanted to give them back. but he was afraid you'd throw them away if they came from him. I turned to Arthur. You think that's what I do? Throw things away? His mouth opened, but no answer came. That silence nearly ruined me. I pointed at him. Say something. Arthur's eyes filled, though no tears fell. I don't know how to talk to you. I felt my whole body tighten. You had 41 years to practice. He nodded once, as if accepting the sentence. I know. Nora whispered my name, but I was already moving toward the door. I can't do this. Caleb, she said. No. You don't get to decide when my past walks back into my life. You don't get to dress it up as mercy and hand it to me in a cabin. I know. And you, I said, turning to Arthur. Don't get to look at me like I'm the hard part. His face crumpled. I left before either of them could answer. The cold outside hit me so hard it almost felt clean. I drove until the road curved down by the public boat launch, then pulled over near the frozen lake. I turned the engine off. The heater ticked as it cooled. My breath clouded the windshield. For a long time, I did nothing. Then I took off my gloves and covered my face. I had spent weeks imagining betrayal. I had built a whole case in my head. Nora with another man. Nora bored with our quiet life. Nora finding warmth somewhere I could not give it. Every receipt, every phone call, every late night had become a nail in that story. And I had been wrong, not completely. That was the cruel part. Nora had lied. She had hidden something enormous. She had looked at my deepest wound and decided I was too fragile to know it had started bleeding again. But I had also turned my wife into my father because silence was the only language fear had taught me. When Arthur disappeared, I learned to read absence as danger. When my mother said he was tired, I learned that explanations could be blankets thrown over broken glass. When Nora said, "Please trust me," I did not hear my wife asking for time. I heard every closed door from my childhood locking again. I sat there until my phone lit up. Nora. I did not answer. A minute later, a text came through. I'm home when you want to come home. I'm sorry. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. The lake stayed dark. In the pocket of my coat, my fingers found the old watch I carried sometimes. It had been Nefasader's father's, passed to me after she died. It did not keep perfect time anymore. I could fix it if I wanted to. I never did. Some things I had told myself should be allowed to be imperfect if they had survived. Apparently that rule had not applied to people. I came home after midnight. Nora was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea she had not drunk. The brass key lay between us. She looked up, but she did not rush me. That mattered. I took off my coat, hung it on the chair, and sat across from her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, I thought you were leaving me. Her face broke. Oh, Caleb, I thought there was someone else. I know, you let me think that. I was trying not to tell a truth that wasn't mine to force on you. I looked at the key, but you forced it anyway. Just slower. She closed her eyes. Yes, that yes did more than any defense could have. It gave me somewhere solid to stand. I'm angry, I said. You should be. At him, at you, at myself. She nodded. I'm angry at myself, too. I leaned back and looked at the ceiling, at the small crack we kept meaning to patch. Why didn't you tell me after the first week? Because he asked me not to. Because I thought he was scared. Because I thought if I could get him settled, if I could find the boxes, if I could understand what he wanted, then maybe I could bring it to you in a way that hurt less. I looked at her then. Nora, there is no way to make my father hurt less. She began to cry again, quietly, the way she did when she was trying not to make her pain another person's responsibility. I know that now. I reached for my wedding ring without thinking and twisted it around my finger. It was a habit when I was anxious. Nora watched the movement. I saw fear pass through her eyes. I stopped twisting it. Then I took it off. Her breath caught. I held the ring in my palm for a moment, looking at the small scratches from years of work, oil, winter, dishes, life. Then I slid it back on. I'm not leaving tonight, I said. She covered her mouth. But we don't fix this by pretending it was noble. No, she said. You don't protect me from my life. I won't. And I don't get to convict you in my head because I'm afraid to ask better questions. She wiped her face. That sounds almost healthy. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out tired but real. The next morning, I opened the shop and ruined 3 clocks before noon. Not permanently. I just could not focus. I put a mainspring in backward, misplaced a screw, and spent 10 minutes searching for tweezers that were clipped to my apron. At 1 o'clock, I turned the sign to closed. The bakery still had cinnamon bread, Nora's favorite, because Mrs. Alvarez always saved a loaf when she knew we had been having a hard week. Small towns do not need details to know trouble has walked into a house. When I got home, Nora was in the living room, sitting at the piano but not playing. I put the bread on top of it. Peace offering, I said. She looked up. Is it poisoned? Only emotionally. She smiled a little. We ate slices at the kitchen table with too much butter. We talked badly at first. too carefully, stepping around the worst parts until Nora finally said, "This is ridiculous." We're both acting like the truth is a sleeping bear. It sort of is. Then let's stop poking it with teaspoons. So we talked. She told me Arthur had been staying in motels before she found him at the community center. He had sold most of his tools years ago. His hands had started failing him. He had a condition that made fine motor work difficult and balance unreliable. Not a death sentence. Not a neat dramatic clock ticking down. Just the slow humiliation of a man whose whole identity had lived in his hands. "He didn't ask me for money," she said. "Not at first, but you gave it to him. For food, medicine, heat." I nodded, hating that I could not hate her for that. She told me he had kept the cabin because it was not worth much, and because it had been the last place my mother visited with him before she got sick. The boxes had been there for years. He had moved them from storage to storage, never opening most of them. "Why now?" I asked. Nora wrapped both hands around her mug. He said he was tired of being the only person who knew what he regretted. I looked toward the window. A regret. That useless furniture people drag into rooms after everyone has moved out. "I don't know if I want to see him," I said. "You don't have to. I don't want you arranging things." "I won't. If I go back, it's because I choose to." Yes, there was no music, no swelling moment, no perfect embrace. Just two people at a table, learning how badly love could misjudge itself and still be love. 3 days later, I drove to Millstone Road alone. I parked in front of the cabin and sat there long enough for Arthur to see me through the window and not come outside. That was the smartest thing he had done in years. When I finally knocked, he opened the door and stepped back. No hug, no sun, no performance. "Coffee?" he asked. "No tea?" "No." He nodded. "I don't know what to offer. The truth would be a start." He gripped the back of a chair. For a moment, I thought he would shut down. I knew the look, the retreat behind the eyes, the old vanishing act without moving his feet. Then he sat. "I was a coward," he said. The words were plain. No decoration, no explanation pretending to be apology. I stayed standing. "With your mother," he continued. "With you. With grief. With shame." I thought if I didn't say the wrong thing, I couldn't make anything worse. But silence was the wrong thing. I just kept choosing it. I looked at his hands. They trembled against his knees. "Why did you leave?" He stared at the floor. "Because I didn't know how to stay and be seen failing. It was not enough." It was also more than I had ever gotten. He pointed toward the boxes. "She kept everything," he said. "Your mother. I kept it after. I told myself I'd bring it to you when I knew how." "You didn't know how for 15 years?" "No." I wanted to punish him for that answer. The simplicity of it made me furious. No elaborate excuse. No villain speech. Just a weak man who had lost years because he did not know how to cross a room. He opened the first box. Inside were photographs curled at the edges. My mother in a yellow sweater, laughing at something outside the frame. Me at 8, missing a front tooth, holding up a fish the size of my hand like I had conquered nature. A birthday card I had made with glue and crooked stars. A stack of sheet music in my mother's handwriting. Arthur lifted something wrapped in newspaper. His hand struggled with the tape, so I reached forward before I thought better of it and tore it open. A small wooden horse lay inside. I knew it instantly. He had carved it for me when I was 6. One leg was shorter than the others because I had dropped it down the stairs and cried until my mother told me injured horses could still run in dreams. I thought it had been thrown away when we cleared her house. I picked it up. The wood had darkened. One ear was chipped. Along the underside, in tiny uneven letters, was my name, Caleb. My throat closed. Arthur watched me like he was afraid breathing too loudly would send me away. "I kept that on my bench," he said. "For a long time. Why?" His face folded inward. "Because it was easier to miss you near something that couldn't ask me why I wasn't calling." I set the horse down carefully. The anger did not disappear. That is not how anger works when it has had decades to build furniture in your chest. But something shifted, not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the clean way people like to imagine. It was recognition. My father was not a monster. That would have been easier. He was a man who had failed so completely that everyone around him had to build lives around the empty space. "I lost too many years hating someone who wasn't even there," I said. He nodded, crying now without sound. "I'm not ready to forgive you. I know. I don't know if I'll visit again next week or next month. I understand. And if you disappear this time, don't come back." He looked up. "I won't disappear." I almost laughed, because promises from Arthur Mercer had the structural integrity of wet cardboard. But then he added, "If I get scared, I'll say I'm scared." That was the first adult sentence I had ever heard from him. I left with a wooden horse in my coat pocket and a box of my mother's music in the passenger seat. When I got home, Nora was on the porch, wrapped in the green coat, waiting without making it look like waiting. She did not ask how it went. I took the horse out and handed it to her. She held it with both hands. "Oh," she whispered, "that was all." I leaned against the railing beside her. The lake was gray under the afternoon light. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked and a truck complained up the hill. "I'm still mad at you," I said. "I know. I love you. I know that too." I looked at her. "You're very confident for a woman in trouble." She smiled, but her eyes were wet. "I'm a music teacher. I can hear when something resolves." I did not tell her nothing had resolved. Not completely. But maybe resolution was not the same as ending. Maybe it was just two notes that had fought each other, finally finding a way to exist in the same chord. The weeks after that were not easy. Nora stopped putting her phone face down, not because I demanded it, but because secrecy had become a bruise between us, and she refused to press on it casually. I stopped asking questions in the shape of accusations. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes she got defensive. Sometimes we sat at opposite ends of the couch, two stubborn people pretending the television mattered. But we kept talking. That was new for me. Talking before the silence hardened. Talking before fear wrote the whole story by itself. Arthur stayed in the cabin through the end of winter. A social worker helped him arrange better care. Nora stepped back because I asked her to, and because she knew by then that help can become control when it is offered in someone else's name. I visited him some Saturdays, not every Saturday. Sometimes I drove halfway there and turned around. Sometimes I sat with him in the old workshop while he told me small things about my mother. How she sang off key on purpose when she was happy. How she once painted an entire bookshelf blue because she said brown furniture made a room feel too obedient. How she had wanted me to have the piano but could not convince me to take it after the funeral. She said, "You fix time." Arthur told me once, looking around at the dead clocks I had brought him to tinker with, though his hands could barely manage a screwdriver. "I fix clocks," I said. He smiled faintly. "Same family, different branch." I did not smile back right away. Then I did. Spring came late that year. It always does in Vermont, no matter what the calendar promises. Snow stayed in dirty piles along the roads. The lake thawed from the edges inward. People emerged from their houses blinking like they had survived an old war. One morning, I placed the wooden horse on a shelf in my shop, between a French carriage clock and a cracked porcelain dial I had not found the right case for yet. It looked out of place there. Too simple. Too wounded. "Did you make that?" one asked. "No," I said. "My father did." The sentence felt strange in my mouth. Not warm. Not bitter. Just true. That afternoon, Nora came by after school. She brought coffee from the bakery and a stack of drawings her students had made of musical instruments that looked mostly like vegetables. She stood in front of the shelf and touched the horse's chipped ear. "Good spot," she said. "Gets morning light." She slipped her hand into mine. For a while, we stood there listening to the clocks. People think broken trust sounds like shouting. Sometimes it does. But more often, it sounds like a phone turned face down on a table, a question swallowed at dinner, a car idling outside a house you are afraid to enter. And healing does not sound like music at first. It sounds like the uncomfortable scrape of chairs being pulled back to the table. It sounds like someone saying, "I was wrong," without adding a defense. It sounds like an old man admitting he was scared. It sounds like a wife saying, "I should have told you," and a husband saying, "I should have asked before I accused." I did not get my childhood back. Nora and I did not become some perfect couple who never hurt each other again. Arthur did not transform into the father I needed when I was 10. But the past stopped being a locked room holding up the wall. It became a room I could enter when I chose, with windows I could open, with dust I could see clearly in the light. And some mornings, when I unlock the shop and the first sun comes through the front glass, it lands on that small wooden horse and turns the old scratches gold. I still fix clocks. I still believe some things cannot be restored to what they were. But I have learned that not every broken thing is asking to become new. Some things only need to be held carefully, cleaned of what time left on them, and placed where they can be seen without fear.